Welcome to today's Sew Along. Today we're going to be making a boxy pouch, or in my case I'll be taking you through making 2 boxy pouches just to show you some of the little differences that are available in such a pattern like this, how versatile the different bases can be, and a lot of the techniques you might see me use are interchangeable across different fabrics, and just depends on the overall outcome you want. So I'll be making 2 different pouches but with like very different fabrics. One will be the synthetic leather pouch and the other will be using just a cotton twill. But what we'll be doing is we'll be interfacing the cotton twill, and then the end result will be a similar shape and structure bag, but because the fabric is very different structure, just how we go about that is a little bit different. So today's first video is about getting all your resources together. So as you can see here, I've got my laptop open with my pattern. I prefer to print as little as possible. I've got everything already out here. So got my beautiful Tellery synthetic leather. There is 1/2 meter there, but you only need a fat quarter. I have I think there's probably 3 or 4 meters of continuous zipper tape in there. Obviously we'll be cutting that to size, and a number 5 zipper pull that will go on the tape. And for this one, I'm going to show you how to use some fold over elastic as the binding. But obviously you can use any binding. Then the second boxy bag will be the twill. So as you can see, very thin. I've got a closed end zipper with the zipper pull already on that we'll trim to size. And then we've got our interfacings. So because it's a twill, I'll be using 2 layers of woven fusible interfacing. And then I'll be using a layer of fusible foam. If you're using a canvas, you may just want to use the fusible interfacing and not the foam, as it might get too thick. For a pattern like this, I do like to print out if any of the pages have important information that I'd be referring back to quite often. It's a good page to print rather than the whole pattern pieces. So we're going to be making the medium pouch. So as you can see there, it's got all the measurements for the pouch itself, the bindings, and any straps. I've got my clips, good pen, my scissors, rotary cutter, and my 2 rulers. So let's get cutting. So here with the synthetic leather, the first thing I'm going to do is prepare the piece to be cut. So I like to cut off my selvage, the white parts, because you don't want to accidentally include that, because sometimes it can be quite thick and isn't always going to be in your seam allowance. So I do like to trim that off before starting to mark. I do like to use a rotary cutter from a lot of the cutting that I do with synthetic leather. You are cutting a lot of straight lines, which is easier to do with a rotary cutter and a good sturdy ruler. Cutting corners and things like that's a bit different, but for this pattern we'll be only using straight lines. So now I'm going to flip it over. I find that there are lots of pens you can still mark synthetic leather with, but the majority of them I still am worried are going to leave a mark, so I do like to flip over and do all my marking on the wrong side of the fabric. So I'm going to be measuring out the medium piece, and thankfully my print on the synthetic leather is multi-directional, so I don't have to worry too much about that. I can just mark up. So I've got a couple of favorite rulers. This one in particular is quite long and has markings for centimeters. And then I have a second ruler that is quite sturdy, and that's the ruler I like to cut with. So that's why you'll see me marking with this longer ruler at the moment, and then I will get my nice sturdy and thick quilting ruler out when it's time to cut. Simple. That's our one piece of synthetic leather. So for this one, I'm just going to add a tab. I think it's always easier if you're opening and closing boxes like this to have a tab, but I'm just going to include this on the one end. So we've got our two pieces of synthetic leather, the tab and the main piece. Now it's time to cut our zipper. So if you're using zipper tape, you still want to allow a little bit of excess on each side. So just measuring that against the pattern piece, cutting it off. I use a special pair of scissors, just particularly for zippers. And we've got our zipper pull, and with the binding, I'll cut that to size when it's time to construct. Now it's time to flip the piece over and add the markings. So you want to mark out the center and the sides. So again, the pattern pieces and the pattern information tells you exactly where to put these with reference to what size you're making. So whether you're making the small, the medium like me, or the large size. So just following those patterns to mark those where you need them. So I'll put these pieces together with the binding and take them over to the sewing machine. So let's get into sewing up the synthetic leather bag. So here is my basic sewing machine. As you can see, I have got it already set up, but I'll go through some of the important pieces. I've got a Teflon foot that I'm using for the synthetic leather. I like to make sure my speed is down super low so that I'm not tempted to rush. We're on a straight stitch setting, alternating between the needle positionings depending on what we're doing. Tension is around 4-ish, but I've just got a little scrap here that I'm going to just give it a little test to see if I'm happy with my thread tension. Testing it on a couple of different stitch lengths just to be sure. I've got a Microtex needle in the machine. With the synthetic leather, it's usually the 80-12 that I like to use. So yeah, I think that thread tension looks pretty good. I think the temptation can be to increase your thread tension too much, thinking that you're going to get a tighter seam, but what that can actually do with vinyl is it can cause the thread to sort of even tear and rip into the vinyl. So you actually want to make sure your tension is spot on. So the first step is to take your tab piece, fold it in half, and we're going to baste this on to the center mark using our clip to clip it in place. Now when basting, another little tip with synthetic leather is make sure you have increased your stitch length. Do not back stitch. This is extra important with synthetic leather because the more holes you put in the synthetic leather, the weaker it can become. The next step is to attach the zipper. So I'm going to be doing this step differently to the way the pattern describes it. So you may need to watch this section a couple of times for it to make sense. With the second bag, the twill bag, I will be constructing the zipper the same way as the pattern. So you'll be able to do one way or the other, depending on how you feel more comfortable. So first of all, you want to take your zipper, separate the two pieces, and then grab my secret tool for zippers, which is double-sided tape. So I'm going to apply a piece of double-sided tape to where I want the zipper piece to go. And then we are going to stick that one side of the zipper down, and you want the zipper teeth facing down towards the vinyl and away from the seam. Lining up those edges up the top. And the good thing is you can use a couple of clips as well if you like, but you don't need too many clips, which makes it easier when we're getting it to the machine. You want to drop your stitch length down to 2.5, and I've changed my needle position across to the far left. This means that I don't have to swap to using a zipper foot and can just continue to use the Teflon foot with that needle aligned to the left. We're going to back stitch just a couple of times. Again, do not overdo your back stitching, as again it can weaken the vinyl. And we're just following the line of the zipper down. I've made sure that I haven't sped up or slowed down the video at this point in time, just to show you how slow you really do need to go to make sure that it's nice and accurate. Back stitching at the end, but again, not overdoing it. Beautiful. Now then we need to fold that over, give it a really good finger press, really nice finger press. Don't know how to say that any other way. And now we're going to top stitch. So to top stitch, you want to increase your stitch length up to about 4. Again, keeping that needle position across to the left. And again, I'm intentionally keeping this video at real-time speed so you can see how fast I work. Now for this particular bag, I'm using a slightly wider seam, wider top stitching than I may with other types of bags. You'll see why in a second. Because we don't have a lining hiding and enclosing the zipper tape, you'll see that if you keep a slightly wider top stitch, as you can see there, it actually creates a really nice and neat finish against the raw edge of the zipper that's not going to fold up or get in the way at all. If you found that your top stitching is too narrow, you can always just do a second row. That will then hold down that zipper tape nice and neatly. Now we're just going to repeat the process on the other side. Double-sided tape down first. Taking our zipper teeth again, we want the zipper teeth down towards the vinyl and away from the raw edge, with a little bit of overhang each side. And needle position far across to the left. I've dropped my stitch length back down again. And I definitely do find that I tend to use the speed on the machine to make sure that I don't go too fast rather than relying on just my foot. The tendency is to move a bit too fast if that's the case. Again, the nice finger press. Obviously you can't iron the vinyl, so that's why we have to rely on a finger press. Increasing the stitch length for the top stitch, being slightly wider than the 1/4 inch seam allowance. That will then enclose that raw end of the zipper tape nicely on the inside of the bag. So here comes the fiddly part, the part that takes a bit of practice, but once you know how to do it, you'll never go back. Now we have to get the zipper pull onto the zipper tape. So there's a few main things that you need to do here. One, remove any threads that could get caught and in the way. If you've only added one tab like me, you want to be sliding the zipper on from the end that doesn't have the tab. So this step is a little bit easier if one end of your zipper tape is slightly longer than the other side. If they happen to be perfectly level, I'd encourage you cutting off a couple of teeth on one side so that they are a little uneven like this. You want to place your zipper pull on one side of the zipper tape, and then you're going to slide in the other side on about a 45-degree angle. You need both sides of the zipper tape pointing in towards the zipper at about a 45-degree angle, and it's about that angle and the timing. It does take practice. You can see here that although I've got it on, my sides of the setting leather are not equal, so I'm going to take that off and try again. So sliding that zipper onto one side, holding it on about that 45-degree angle, then coming in from the other side on the same angle and just jiggling it about and sliding it through. So once you've got it on and you're happy with the alignment, you actually then slide the zipper all the way off, making sure the bottom end stays connected, and then this top end, just separating the top end to create your 45-degree angle, sliding it on again. And what that means is now both. So you may find you need to go back and watch that, practice it, and your zipper tape. It does take a little bit of practice, but you just need to be gentle, and it's all about the angles and the timing. Next, we're going to move on to the next step. So you want to line up your zipper with the center mark on the bottom side, and we're going to clip that in place. Then folding in your side markings from earlier, we're folding them in to the center. That's it. You want to make sure that your raw edges are aligned. If they're a little bit malaligned, you can sometimes miss them when you're doing your stitching. With vinyl, sometimes you can see I grabbed a bulldog clip there. Find when you're holding a few layers of vinyl together, that can be a little bit better than a clip. So folding in the other side towards the center and adding a clip to that too. Sometimes I just use whatever's handy, making sure that, again, all those raw edges are neatly aligned. Okay, so here we are getting ready to sew one end. We want to sew with a 10mm seam allowance with our stitch length back down, machine speed down. We're using a 1cm seam allowance. You'll notice here with a few layers of vinyl, if you just pop your foot straight down, the foot can be sitting on quite an uphill slope. That can be really hard to get even tension and really get it to feed through. I have what do they call, a hump jumper here. I'm just going to place underneath the back of the foot when I put that down, and you'll see that we're working now with a flat area. If you have an eagle eye, you may notice that this is a different Boxy pouch to where the video left off, and that's because apparently I forgot to press record on this section. So here's another one for you. So again, speed all the way down so that we're not tempted to rush. 1 centimeter seam allowance, making sure we back stitch. Super slow. That's my hump jumper that's just fallen off the back. So this is where what you need to do will be a little bit different on different machines as we approach the zipper. Your safest, best way to do it is to hand crank. Okay, I'm just turning my machine because my cable's in the way. So we want to hand crank through that zipper. That is the safest way to do it. If you know what your machine can handle, you might know that you can handle it. But if you're sewing through the zipper, you want to make sure you are on your slowest possible speed. Just going over that zipper again. And that's just getting through. Okay, sewing up to the end. And my back stitching there. I'm just going to trim off my extra zipper tape with better scissors apparently. Need to go and get some better scissors. 1 second. There we go. That was nice and not even. Another trick when working with zipper tapes, to stop them fraying, it's always good to run a lighter over the end of the zipper. Not just a quick light, decent. You want to sort of melt that polyester so that then it can't unravel at all. Okay, so I mentioned earlier when binding this end, I was going to use some fold over elastic. So I'm just going to cut this to length at here. So you want to measure it against and then leave a little edge. So I'm just going to cut 2 of those, 1 for each end. And again, this is where my trusty double-sided tape comes into play again. So I'm going to put, you can use 2 layers, but again, less the machine's got to get through, the better. So just on the bottom, the wrong side of that fold over elastic, I'm just putting a piece of double-sided tape. Binding is not my favorite skill. It's definitely not something I'm brilliant at. So anything that helps me is better. So I'm just going to place the one side on the back, because that's where I tend to have things go sideways, folding in the edge. You can just lighter the edge if you like rather than fold it over. I just like the finish it gives to do this. So I'm going to use a few clips. As I said, you can use double-sided tape on both sides. You can even use a little bit of glue to keep your binding in place. Most of you would have done some binding before, so you might have an idea of how you like to go about it. As I said, I avoid binding where possible. But it is a 2024 goal to try and get better at it. So again, so now we've just added even more layers to what we've got to get through on the machine. So we're going to need to take things nice and slow. So again, my machine's going to have trouble working uphill from there. so I need to place my hump jumper at the back. Look, you can use folded up fabric, you can use the roll of double-sided tape, anything that creates that level surface. You can, sometimes if you're checking whether your needle's going to get through the layers properly, you could actually hand crank that needle down at the start and sort of feel if the needle's going to handle the layers. So that felt nice and smooth, so I know that I'm okay to sew. Back stitching at the start and the end. Now that's fallen out the back, so I'm just going to re-apply that jumper as I stitch forward. So I'm reasonably confident with my double-sided tape at the bottom that we are hitting what we need at the back. Fold over elastic can be a little bit wiggly, so I do like to hold it in place with either a purple thing, a nail, anything really that just helps keep the top layer in place as well as the bottom layer. You can see there how I didn't hand crank over the zip. That's because I knew from the first pass that my machine was going to handle that quite fine. But I could have easily hand cranked over the zip there again. Again, real time, so you can see that this is quite a slow and careful process. Back stitching at the end here. Just going to trim off my threads. Is that perfect binding? No. Will it do the job? Most definitely will. So as you can see, because that double sides held the bottom side in place nicely, I've got a nice coverage there and then the top. So now what we need to do is repeat that process for the other end of the zip. Aligning the center line, pinching in the sides, clipping them in place, pinching in the sides, clipping them in place, aligning those raw edges. We want a 1 centimeter seam allowance, making sure that foot's nice and level to start. Back stitching. I know the temptation can be to speed things up here. So you can, and I would quite often speed up this section, but as soon as I get to that zip, you want to slow right down. Trim that zipper down, melt the end, get our second piece of binding, add a piece of double-sided tape to the bottom. So there might be a few of you out there a bit more experienced with binding than me, so you may actually find you can do this a little easier and better. Stick that down, fold over our edges. You can use as many or as little clips as you want. And then we're going to stitch that binding in place. Make sure your foot's level at the start. Got my little helper here. I'm at that zipper, so I'm just going to slow right down, hand crank if you need to. Oh, I'm glad I did hand crank that actually, that found a gritty spot. And then nice and slow. The seam here with the end of the zipper tape can be quite a lot of layers, so that's also somewhere that you do need to make sure you're going nice and slow, or even hand crank through depending on your machine. Back stitch at the end. Beautiful. Again, catching at the front, and because of our tape at the back, it hasn't moved. So all we need to do here is trim our threads and turn the bag. So all of our seams are enclosed. Poke through and open that zipper and turn your bag the right way around. I do quite often find sometimes with the synthetic leather bags that can come out not looking the most fabulous shape. Once you start filling it and using the zipper a couple of times, opening and closing the zipper a couple of times, it tends to, the shape of it tends to end up where you want it to be. So this is the one I showed you the binding of, but here's our completed boxy bag we started with. Hopefully yours looks like this. Stay tuned for the next video tomorrow where we'll go through making the bag with the 12. I'll sneak it in here. So you can see how it's ended up with a very similar shape and structure, and that's because of the interfacing and the fusible fleece that we've put in. So you don't have to work with synthetic leather. You can get the same outcome and shape using interfacings. So we'll go through that in the next video. See you then.